the other rooms, you see. But they did the same thing in all Albanian houses and flats through all over Kosovo during those days. There were 8 special police, 79 days in my flat, and in the other flats of Albanians in this house. Me and my wife, we worked together 65 years, and we have got this flat, but we paid it 3 years ago for our children. For all our life that we owned, it was this flat and nothing else. But we are very happy that our children are safe. My brother's children are safe too, because they are in Macedonia. And my friends, some of them are killed. Some of my best friends are killed. I heard about yesterday, and for some of them I have heard 10 days ago, 50 days ago. But most of them are in Albania and in Macedonia. Some colleagues are the professor of University of Pristina, some are journalists, some are teaching pupils at school and so on.
How can you prepare your family to come back and see this?
Oh, we Albanians always say in the morning, if the weather is nice, the day will be nice. We see that the weather today is nice because the NATO troops are in Kosovo. They came for peace here. We hope for peace, and there will be peace. When will be peace, will be everything.
Another day of heartbreak and hope in Kosovo, a land now trying to come to terms with the past and face up to the future. Back to you.
Imagine being forced out of your home, then being told the people who caused you so much pain are no longer around. These people have been praying for that day for a very long time. Northern Albania's refugee camps are now emptying at a colossal rate. The tailback of cars, tractors and lorries trying to get back into Kosovo at times today stretched for many miles. But for aid workers, the flood of people back to their homes at this stage is unwelcome. The Serbs, in one last gesture of defiance, have left booby traps and mines all over this area. So far, no one's been injured at this particular border crossing. But many of the ethnic Albanians returning home come from small rural villages, areas NATO has yet to make safe.
We are trying to, first and foremost, warn them about the dangers that they could be going into right now. We know there's large numbers of landmines. We know there's a problem with unexploded ordnance. We want to make sure people are aware of the dangers that they might be facing once they get across the other side.
But these people are just happy to be heading back to their homeland. They'll worry about what they might find later. Clive Myrie, BBC News, Kosovo.
If you can bear it, listen to the story of the Poklek massacre, for it beggars belief. According to survivors, on Saturday morning, April the 17th, Serb police came to this house, ransacked it, and threw out everything inside. They herded 56 people into one room. Half of them were children. Then a single officer tossed in a hand grenade and finished off his victims with a machine gun. This man says he came back to find his whole family had died in the room, his wife and 4 children. So too had his brother's 6-month-old baby. In Kosovo, it seems no one's too young to be a victim. 14-year-old Elhame Mucholi says she only survived by jumping out of a window. She's still trembling with the trauma of it all.
I hid behind the house for 10 minutes. I could hear the screams of the women and the children. The policeman was shooting again and again.
There was so much blood from the room that it soaked through the floor and flooded down the walls to the basement. Near this house of death is a steelworks in the village of Glogovac. But many people here say the ferronickel factory has not made steel for a long time. Its purpose, they say, was far more sinister, to incinerate the bodies of civilians massacred by the Serbs. Today we found villagers trying to investigate the furnaces. According to one report, Serbs recently exhumed several hundred bodies from 3 mass graves and burned them here. This woman's father may be one of the missing men whose ashes are here. Ironically, he used to work in this factory.
Before the police came here, this was a wonderful place because I used to come here with my daddy. Now it's frightening.
Do you fear he may be dead?
Yes.
Do you fear his body may have been burnt here, perhaps?
A lot of people who are missing, we are feared that they must be in here.
Maybe including your father?
Yes.
If it is true that the Serbs burnt hundreds of bodies here, then we may never know exactly how many innocent civilians were slaughtered in Kosovo. Certainly what war crimes investigators fear is that the Serbs had enough time before their withdrawal to destroy much of the evidence of what they did. Ben Brown, BBC News, Glogovac.
Wenn der Umgang mit der Waffe alles andere als routiniert ist. Plötzlich nähert sich ein Auto, ein feindlicher Serbe, wie die Männer vermuten. Die Gewehre werden angelegt. Groß ist dann die Erleichterung und Freude, als sich der Fahrer als Landsmann herausstellt. Schwierig ist die Kommunikation nach außen. Die Telefonanlagen sind von der NATO zerbombt. Das Satellitentelefon des Reporters muss herhalten. Immer wieder sind Detonationen und Kampflärm zu hören. Ob von der serbischen Armee, der NATO oder der UÇK. Wir wissen es nicht. Die Bilder, noch aufgenommen vor dem Friedensabkommen, zeigen auch, wie die kosovarische Befreiungsarmee patrouilliert, um die Zeltlager der Kosovo-Albaner vor serbischen Übergriffen zu schützen. Am Abend dann im Zelt versucht die kleine Truppe, die schrecklichen Bilder des Tages zu vergessen und sich selbst Mut für den nächsten Tag zu machen.
3 days after the start of the air campaign, NATO said that there were clear signs of major human rights violations developing in Kosovo at a frightening speed. On April the 8th, the United Nations Secretary-General Kofi Annan said that in his opinion there was enough evidence to show that an evil and systematic campaign of ethnic cleansing was indeed underway. The problem for the aid agencies and for journalists was verifying the stories. But the point made by the United Nations time and again was that if only a tiny percentage were true, it was still totally unacceptable. What is clear is that the start of the NATO campaign on March the 24th this year sparked a change in the actions of the Yugoslav authorities. They developed what seems to have been a quite specific plan to increase the level of violence and intimidation aimed at the Albanians. Nasser Gashi's account of what happened at Spitzer is one of 3 we collected. It left us in no doubt that what has been alleged is a true record of what took place. The United Nations believes him too and is using him as an eyewitness.
About 150 of us managed to escape into the mountains. The Serbs were very close, but they could not see us. We had to stay where we were for fear of being spotted. We realized it was the Serbs because we could hear them talking. There was a military officer who threatened the men who were still captive. Then they asked them to put 3 fingers up and told them to turn around. They took the men and put them with their backs to the mountain. Then they divided them into groups. They asked them if they wanted to be shot or have their throats cut. The men did not reply. Then the Serbs asked for money. Those who had some handed it over. Then he ordered 2 soldiers to fire. When they shot the first time, they were ordered to switch their guns to automatic fire. They sprayed the men 3 times. All the men were lying dead on the ground, and the Serbs left. We were unable to say a word. We were shattered. We all thought we were going to die. 99% of me thought I was a dead man. All the villages around were on fire. The Serbs were running around, setting fire to everything. They went into every house which was flying an Albanian flag and shot the people inside. They then set fire to houses. They burned about 500 tractors and destroyed everything they found. At one house, there was a woman in a tractor who stayed put. They set her on fire. 4 men were also burned.
Paramilitary groups who initially operated in the rural areas, traditional strongholds of the Kosovo Liberation Army, began to focus on cities and towns, supported by regular troops and police. The campaign to force the Albanians to leave had 2 elements: extortion, perhaps to provide unwilling conscripts a monetary motive, and murder, sporadic and indiscriminate, but designed to scare them off for good.
There were only 687 of us out of more than 85,000 who'd been forced to leave Mitrovica. We were the first group and had got further than the others. From there we left Banja Pec. We came to the center of the town. It was very crowded. We did not know where to go. We wanted to travel to Deçan and Gjakova, so we could reach Albania. A policeman came up to us and took us towards the railway station, where there were a football pitch and a bus station. From there we could go to Deçan. We saw a massive fire, despite the fact that it was raining hard. We had been forced to walk all that way, with no vehicles or food. There wasn't time to bring anything. They only gave us 7 minutes to leave our homes. They used chemicals to set fire to the houses, so the flames would not go out. They took us to the building and said, "There you are, you terrorists who kill policemen." How could we kill policemen with just women and children? We said we were not terrorists. They asked for money again, and someone said there was none. They searched us and made us strip, and found the money we had hidden in our clothes. I said, "They are going to kill me anyway." As they undressed us, they threw all our clothes on the fire. They took 3,800 Deutschmarks of me, which I had hidden in my shirt. They were searching women as well, looking inside their bras while they still had them on. They were touching the women all over. I thought I was going to die anyway. After all, I had watched them throw my niece, wearing only her knickers, onto the ground, put hand grenades under her armpits, and open fire all around her with a machine gun.
Anyone was a target, but with the move to the cities, leaders, intellectuals and professionals were a lucrative and useful class to destabilize. Alma Saluka crossed the border on April the 17th this year. Part-time model and translator, she is now in Kukes on the northern Albanian border. For 3 weeks in her hometown of Prizren, she survived as the Serb police turned the town upside down looking for her. The consequences of being caught, unimaginable.
They were searching for us, and they went into my grandmother's house and grandfather, and they said, "You have to give up your sons, because in other way when we find them, we will kill them." So we had some other guys. They said, "You have to leave the city, because you don't have any other choice." And my family was terrified. They were much more afraid, because I was the one that the Serbians were looking for, just because I worked in OSC, and I decided to take that risk and to start to come in Albania. It was a very big risk, but I had to do it.
The camps of northern Albania are huddled together around the town of Qershor. It is the first major settlement the refugees come to after the barren, rocky passes they were forced to trudge through to find safety. It is a place of staggering scenery, rushing rivers, poor roads and wet and windy conditions even in summer. The road of the refugees was intimidating and tough. Time and again, witnesses from the camp stressed that as the NATO bombings intensified, the determination of the Serbs to force the Kosovar Albanians to leave intensified as well. Quite soon after the start of our interviews, it became clear that the beginning of Ramadan on March the 28th provided Serb commanders and troops an ideal opportunity to swoop. On the first night of Ramadan, Muslim families traditionally gather in large numbers. In Izbica, it signaled the start of a massacre.
We left on the 27th of March. They kicked us out of our house in the village and put us in a school. Everyone in the village stayed the night. The next morning, they surrounded the school and started shooting into the air. They asked us for money. They wanted 1,000 marks for each family and 100 for the tractors. We gave whatever we had, so they got the money, but it wasn't enough, and they said we had to give them more. Some people gave more, but others had run out. So they started separating the women, touching them all over and using offensive language. And they screamed at us, saying, "Why are the Americans not here?" They ordered the women and children to go to Jakova and then to Albania. We walked about 50 meters and then we heard the shooting. We saw them killing the man. They burned the houses and the tractors and everything else they could find. Yes, 152 men were killed in Izbica, Skanderbeg.
Sauda crossed the border at Qershor, exhausted. She had carried her disabled brother for days and nights, never believing she would ever escape with her life.
When we came to Jashanica in Klin, there was a big hole. It was about 10 at night. A long queue of Albanians was thrown in the hole by the Serbs. There were women and children only. Then they brought tanks near to the hole, and one of them said, "These people are to be run over by the tanks." They put the tanks in a line. The hole was very deep and there was water in there as well. One of the Serbs ordered the tanks to move and ran us all over, and the tanks started to move towards us. They were about 20 to 30 meters away and began edging towards us. We were all screaming with fright and we tried to escape, but we never thought we would survive. Then, as they got to within about 5 meters of us, someone shouted, "Stop!" They stopped the tanks and said if we wanted to leave, we would have to give them 5,000 marks. A teacher started to collect the money from whoever had any left. Some had cash, some didn't, but we managed to come up with the money, and they let us go.
The borders were not always busy. For days at a time, no one appeared, and it was impossible to know where the people were. They recount stories of being herded back and forth around the country inside the horseshoe, turned round and round again, each new patrol they encountered stealing what they could. In Macedonia, a largely Orthodox religious country with little love for Albania, thousands would arrive, their journeys certainly harrowing, but they'd be greeted with the grim bureaucracy of a country that didn't want them. For days they wait in no man's land as border guards process their arrival with mind-numbing indifference. The line to freedom was a terrible place.
It was just quiet. People's hearts were broken. It was very touching because during the night we had 4 babies died and the Macedonian police just took them, put them in a plastic bag and took them away. So it was a very quiet night. It was just silence, and it was terrible. You saw everyone you looked, I mean, you saw those faces, and they were in deep pain. They were really hurt, and you were one of them. And it was like we were there, standing there, and we didn't know what are we going to do. It was like we were crossing into the unknown, because I personally didn't have any family here in Macedonia. And I was with my mother, my brothers, my sister. I didn't know if my dad is going to cross the border or not. It was just overwhelming pain. And you could feel, and it was eating me, it was destroying me. Plus I had heard about some people that I really cared for that were killed. And it was just, I mean, everything was just building up. And I thought, I'm going to lose it. This is it. I can't take it anymore. But you just have to hold on for the sake of others, if not yourself. It was just, you could see those faces were so grim and so hurt. They were really hurt.
Just standing here and witnessing the sheer number of people passing through the border in a dreadful state is a moving and awful experience. It's hard to believe it's taking place in Europe in 1999. The Macedonian government, perhaps because of the assurances from the United Nations, have agreed to leave the border open. But they have other concerns as well. It's thought more than 100,000 refugees have passed over the border and not been registered, and the economy here simply can't cope with it. In the mountains of the borderlands, they are surviving as best they can, billeted by volunteer Albanian families who are breaking the law but seem to accept their moral duty to protect their ethnic brothers, sisters and children. Aid is slowly arriving here, brought when possible by aid workers concerned that this hidden population will suck dry the meagre resources of the local people. For the vast majority, though, this is the start of life in the refugee camps. Baking hot conditions, a wait for hours on a bus, and then chaos as they arrive in whichever refugee camp can take them.
Just 5 minutes, and then you'll be going to your tent.
As word spreads around the camps that new arrivals are imminent, hundreds of people make their way to the camp gates in the hope that missing relatives or loved ones will be among those who reach the border, or someone might have news of them at least. Arvasi Patel, herself a refugee from the 1970s campaign of terror in Uganda, runs the #1 camp at Stankovic, close to the border with Kosovo. Her appearance anywhere outside the confines of the UNHCR complex inevitably means she is mobbed by people trying to find a way out. Her camp is thought by the refugees to be the easiest to leave in search of a new life abroad.
She's asking if it's possible to change the place where she signed in.
My advice is if you've got a government that's interested in taking you, and it's not your first choice or even your third choice, just take it if you don't want to remain in the camp.
You know, this morning I've always woken up with a call like, how many can you take? So, you know, we've had 7,000 in already. Of course, we've had some departures, and these departures are on the humanitarian evacuation program. So give or take, I said, well, we'd probably be able to manage 1,000 today, but usually we get a few hundred more. And then, of course, there are a lot of people who are trying to get in because of the humanitarian evacuation program. So they're taking up tent space, which we clear out. Yeah. But they're not going to knock on my door and say, oh, well, I'm coming in. But so what I think is available suddenly turns to be unavailable.
Yeah. Do you find yourself having to be quite hard-nosed about this?
Definitely. I mean, you know, my principles are that every refugee has a right to accommodation and medical assistance. But here, what I'm saying is, unless you come in an official capacity by a bus, if you arrive by foot, you may well have crossed the border, but we can give you the protection you deserve and you have the rights to in another camp where the humanitarian evacuation program isn't fully established yet. And it seems that a lot of people are coming in from Macedonia who have temporary protection by the Macedonian government. which basically means that they don't need to be going to a Western European country because Macedonia is giving them protection, but they're ripping up their green cards or they're hiding them and saying that they've just arrived, and they're learning a lot of tricks to get into Stankovic 1, which has the highest number of people leaving on the humanitarian evacuation program.
These camps are now home to hundreds of thousands. Conditions are bleak, but basic hygiene is evident, although reports of disease outbreaks are on the increase. Most refugees say they're determined to go home as soon as they can, but there are 1 million of them scattered around the region, and it will take many months before they can all return to what used to be their homes. While the sun shines, that's not an insurmountable problem, but as the nights draw in and the temperatures drop later in the year, the fierce Balkan winter may still be too much to bear for people who've already been through such terrible times.
Be on their way out of Kosovo, but there's still time for a few final acts of aggression. NATO has said 26,000 troops have now left the province and another 14,000 are on their way back to Serbia. But that doesn't mean the ethnic Albanians are safe. Let's go live to Jeremy Thompson in the Kosovo capital, Pristina. Jeremy.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening. They were given some leeway over the first phase of their withdrawal, but that may just have given the Serb forces more time to kill. One ethnic Albanian family in the south of Kosovo held a funeral today for a 14-year-old boy. He was shot by Serb paramilitaries who were supposed to be moving out of his village. Sky's David Chater travelled outside the town of Peć to hear the family's story. And you may find some of the pictures in his report disturbing.
Italian troops went on full alert in Peć today as Serbian civilians reported the KLA had entered the city. They feared for their lives. 100,000 of their ethnic Albanian neighbors were driven from their homes here. The dead have still to be counted. But the KLA were not bent on revenge. They'd come to protect their own people still under attack by Serbian paramilitaries. Just outside the city, we came across the evidence. The Mugaj family had just buried their only son, Gezim. Just 14 years old,